You just cannot grow AI magic on barren data
So
soil.
that
Yeah.
entire organization's HR data hinges on that 1 or 2% team. If that person is on leave, or if that person leaves the organization, the entire institutional knowledge of managing data, that is what gets lost.
Organizations have already spent and burned 2, 3, 4 weeks in getting their data set ready. By that time, most organizations have lost the appetite to take that decision, or would have taken a decision which is partially backed by an idea of what a data might be, plus what their intuition is actually saying it is.
The next step is obviously to use data to help the business take the right decisions. So what we've been able to do is to reduce the dashboard refresh, let the cycle from 2 weeks to about 3 days. And the data accuracy has gone up significantly from 60% to almost like more than 85%. And this is all in less than 1 month.
You've written on LinkedIn that most HR teams silently live with data chaos, spending days every month just reconciling files and cleaning up data instead of driving strategic decisions. These challenges are real, but do not get the due attention. And Raswinder, you've written a very elaborate and an amazing article called Your HR Stack is Bleeding Money and Trust. I've spoken to hundreds of HR leaders on this podcast and separately, and rarely do I find HR leaders talking of data as the biggest problem. How did you arrive at this problem, which now you've gone and built a company to try to solve this?
A core part of the work that at least both of us have been doing has been linked on saying how can we help organizations use data more effectively. So how can analytics drive a lot of the outcomes, saying do we have the right talent density? Do we see a lot of attrition? Where is it happening? Why is it happening? Can you drive engagement and things like that? So when we started looking at the overall problem, our realization was that there is a data problem which gets masked by a strategy problem overall. Right? Incidentally, when Ankit and I both decided to move out of our corporate jobs, we realized that we want to do something in the analytics space. We had some great success in designing awesome dashboards. The clients loved it. But we saw the usage just diminish after 3 months of building them out. And we kept going back and asking what's not working and why are you struggling. And a couple of things came out. One was the whole point around we aren't able to tell the story that we really want to from the data, because dashboards become static with HR data over a period of time. You've gotten used to seeing a number or a metric. So story building becomes pertinent. The second we kept hearing was that, we're not able to link back a lot of the metrics to an ROI directly. And that was probably a challenge that they were facing, again, saying, attrition is increasing, but how do I convert it into a monetary or a dollar value for organizations to enable? And the third that they kept saying was, data syncs, data uploads were actually impacting how the dashboard was being utilized. So trust was becoming a factor. So the 2 points that he called out, both trust and bleeding dollars, was something that started showing up quite frequently in the work that we're doing. And given our history of seeing it for over 15 years, we realized that, there is a problem that everyone knows, pushes under the carpet, but probably needs a solution. So that's when we both decided in saying, let's get into this world and solve it for HR, because enterprise organizations have obviously solved for data at some degree. We need to do it for HR as well.
So when you say data is the problem, so what exactly is the problem? Is it lack of data, fragmentation of data all over the places? Like what's the exact scenario problem here?
HR today is not a monolith in terms of how they work with the tech stack, right? You just don't implement one HRMS and say, I'll have the same ATS, performance systems, and the other systems that you work with. Everyone wants best in class, best in breed systems to come in. So you might have an HRMS from one, but an ATS from another system, a payroll, which is a third system, an LND from another. So what starts happening is that although all of them require similar starting points of data, saying, you need an employee record to kind of associate and link all of them, but the data that you set up is quite different. So you end up getting very fragmented data structures that get set up. You also end up not connecting them real time. APIs which get either used are pretty brittle, expensive to build. Almost 80% of the organizations we talk to or work with end up saying we don't have APIs, or we do a manual upload weekly, monthly, to kind of work with it, right? And the last big point for us is also there isn't a mindset around data or an education around data in HR. That's very prevalent when you are coming up the ranks. So you're not getting used to or exposed to data to the extent you need. And I think both the combinations, which is how we've, you know, grown up in the HR space, not really using data, and to having tech that probably is more oriented towards becoming a system of record or storing data rather than enabling it to be used, causes a friction in terms of how, we've seen data to essentially be the core problem.
Also, Ranak, if you look at how the HR function has shaped over the years, right? Up till now, there was, the entire intent to basically digitize a lot of the processes and get the data in place. Now that that has happened, and since like COVID, most of the HR teams have shopped for the best in class tech stack. The next step is obviously to use data to help the business take the right decisions. So there is frequent reorganization happening, right? Frequent tech migrations happening, frequent performance feedbacks are happening. So HR data is now used more frequently than ever. And with the advent of AI and more analytics coming like at the forefront, data has to come at the center stage so that all the decisions are not backed by a gut, but they're also supported by the right data. The other angle is because they operate from a vantage point where data is not the front and the center of it, right? They are at a level where they see the finished like product. So it is almost like an iceberg where they can look at the tip of the dashboards and the compliance checks if all of that is in place. But what goes behind the scenes are something that obviously the HR leaders are not well versed with.
One interesting point, like you said, what goes behind the scenes. Can you elaborate a little bit? Because ultimately the iceberg has to be seen, right? You have to see those dashboards. How, in your experience, have you seen like companies manage all of this data? What are they doing now? But this problem doesn't surface that much.
You want a board presentation deck to be set up, or you want an attrition analysis or org structure analysis to be done. Um, Teams actually spend weeks pulling in data from multiple systems into a unified file, unified view. There's incomplete data, inconsistent data that exists, or just that you need to probably augment it with newer data to make it usable. All of that actually today is a manual process to the most extent in most organizations, right? To get it ready for any analytics in most places. As you're doing that, organizations have already spent and burned 2, 3, 4 weeks in getting the data set ready. By that time, most organizations have lost the appetite to take that decision or would have taken a decision which is partially backed by an idea of what a data might be, plus what their intuition is actually saying it is. So when you're saying the iceberg, the vast amount of work that goes into getting whatever that data is, even a singular data point, kind of goes unnoticed or unrealized that it's actually taking probably 80% of someone in HR or HR takes time and multiple other stakeholders to kind of come and put together.
No.
If you look at it from the other angle of the data consumers. So look at, from the angle of the HR BPs who are using data on an ongoing basis. And if in case, you were to go back to the days of the appraisal, the weeks it takes for people to get data in place in sync. And, even once the appraisal is done to get to, all the payroll calculation and everything, that is a nightmare for most of the organizations, right? Apart from the usual process, the data itself is a big challenge. And this happens every time they have to run an appraisal. So even for the HRBPs to spend a lot of time in validating data, that itself is a path full of friction, which hinders them, to basically invest time to get data in sync. So the culture of data excellence is, sort of like missing in the HR division.
Yeah. And data is now more used as support to a decision that you already take versus leading with that. Like 100%, like I can go on about these
Yeah.
problems because in my line of business, right, we start with, hey, please give us your core data, which
Yeah.
takes, I smiled when you said 2 and 4 weeks. It's more than 2 and 4 weeks. Much more. Now then people come and say that we want to apply data. Like I tried that. Like I wanted to, like I had an engineer who said, "Later, I have a fancy dashboard all with AI," and it worked in theory. He came to implement, and he spent a month. And he gave up. He was like your data is some in Excel, some in one tool, one in someone's head, one in Kika. Just didn't work, and we actually gave up.
You raised a very valid point. You said that, it's in someone's head. I just wanted to
Yeah.
expand that a bit here. If you look at, how the HR data is right now typically managed, right? You obviously have, all the systems which are generating data for you, but there is someone in the HR operations team that person is the one who knows all the data quality checks. He or she knows, where data is coming from, what are the filters to add, and what is the downstream data I want to supply. Now that person gets pinged 2 a.m. in the night, to get data up and running for next day's board presentation, right? So that
Yeah.
entire organization's HR data hinges on that 1 or 2% team. And if that person is on leave, or if that person leaves the organization, the entire institutional
Yeah.
knowledge of managing
Yeah.
data, that is what gets lost. So you have raised a very valid point that, it's a 1 or 2% job, but then again, the knowledge you can try to capture and, include that as a platform. That is what, right now is missing in the HR teams.
Yeah. And great you brought that up. Would love to hear how are we solving this, because where we stand today, a lot of people who I talk to now, they want to do AI, they want to bring in new tools. All of them are struggling with it. So would love to understand what you guys are building, which can solve this this menace. Honestly, that today now we're just throwing humans at solving.
It starts completely with a data collection lens, right? Data is fragmented for us.
Hmm.
So just augmenting data and making a unified view in itself is the biggest struggle that organizations start with. And organizations today want to go down the more sophisticated route of saying, okay, let's do APIs, let's build databases and stuff like that. And those are absolutely probably the right solutions in the longer term when you have maturity come in. But that's not the starting point. The starting point has to be just understanding your data and saying, okay, how does my data really get structured or linked with another? If you were to just take very simple, data sets, let's say you have an HRMS, you have a performance manager, and an L&D organization. All of the three are actually linked through just one variable, which is your employee ID or employee code. Right now, if you know that
Hmm.
links all of the three, you can actually build connections right from there. You don't need to boil the ocean, build an API, and start it out. And that's probably where we started. We said, if we go down the API route and kind of build that out, organizations are going to struggle by using our platform. It's going to be one of those platforms which are again going to be tough to kind of build and work with. So we started going down that route and saying, how can we
Hmm.
simplify it? So we said, let's assume everyone downloads a report from whichever system they use. They can bring it to our platform
That's what we
and
do.
easily amalgamate it by identifying, okay, this is the variable that joins multiple of my files. And these are the variables that are
Hmm.
repeated across files, right? So you can typically have your name, designation repeated across all of the files. So saying, oh, this is my core file. These are the right details of every employee. Please make sure every file has the same details and the same number of people and things like that. And that's the
Hmm.
first issue that you want to solve. So we said, let's simplify data ingestion. The second point that you called out was, what are the rules that govern your data? How are your org structures associated? You have like a business unit linked to SBU, to a department or function, right? Everyone has their own way of approaching it. How do you
Hmm.
classify nature of exit with exit reasons? So everyone does that. Your HRMS systems allowed, but
Hmm.
how easy is it for you, anyone, to know what those associations are? So what he said is that we need to federate knowledge of what are the rules that are going behind any of the core systems. Because in the absence of that, when anyone has to go and update a front end HRMS or any other systems, they struggle because they don't know, if I were to change one variable, what other variables also need to align or change with it. The third that we've seen happen, and probably this is where we spent the majority of, we actually spent over 4 months building just one part of our tool, was actually saying that, everyone told us, hey, anyone can tell me where the errors are, but can you help me rectify them? Because telling me this is a incorrect is easy, but telling me how to correct it and what's the correct value is going to be tough. So we actually built a entire recommendation engine. I'll show that to you in some time, which actually allows you to correct the errors. You can build new data points in, you can add exceptions, you can basically look at hierarchical structures which have multiple layers of complexity. So everything built in to make sure that you can actually even rectify the error. And probably the last fourth gap that we wanted to solve for was to say, yeah, it's corrected in your system now. So I need Talenode to do this. But my system of record is still not updated, right? So we've worked to create backend channels either through APIs or upload files to actually update a system of record as well. So we've kind of built out the entire value chain, figured out that these are probably the four core points basis our discussions with clients to then say that the homogenizing and creating a solution that works seamlessly across these four steps is probably the answer that we need to go with. So That's how we've kind of built out the platform. Those are the four problems that we've tried to solve for once you know that you need to get your data in place.
And just to add to it, Ranak, when we were building this platform, we obviously, were in touch with reality. So we were speaking with the HR tech leaders, the HR operations leaders, and also the HR BP there. A key need was, so can you build a platform which the HR team can use without any dependence on either tech or the IT team? Because the intent
That's
is
true.
that it is our data and we need to be able to manage it our way. So we have purpose built this platform for HR in a no code manner, because obviously HR team does not have, the tech abilities inbuilt. So what we have done is to give them a platform which they can use it the way they want. They can deploy all the rules in a very templatized way, and there is no coding required which needs to be done on the platform. So we go
Awesome.
live in as less than 2 or 3 days with the
Okay.
HR teams to get all the data owners and the module admins in place. And the idea is for them to be able to add all the rules and get that validated through the rightful data owners on the platform. So it almost becomes a one-stop shop for everyone to look at all the data errors, to correct all the data errors, and to use it as a single source of truth for any downstream use case of your compliance, leadership reports, or your AI use case.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, sounds exciting. Would love to have a look at it. Just get a feel of how this works, so that if they want to use it, they can just reach out to you guys.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Let me share my screen. I wanted to start with probably the more exciting bit and talk about the problem that majority of the folks may not have seen is saying, if I have an error, how do I validate it? Right. And then I'll show you how the backend of the overall engine is built up. So
Sure.
when we thought of this, we said we need to solve for two, three use cases. The first is that there are going to be many people who are going to try and come and solve or correct data on the platform. So we need to have a few basic functionalities available. One is that we can have multiple users come on board, work in parallel on the same file at the same time. So you're basically working on the same one file, stacked across multiple users. Two, we said everyone's used to working on data in an Excel format. So how can we most closely resemble this in an Excel sort of a view, right? So that's exactly what we ended up doing. We said, let's create a view that resembles an Excel. And the third is saying, how can we help users identify where are the data gaps that they need to resolve? And that's what we did. So we said, let's highlight them in a way that kind of ends up working for them. So as you see on the first, it basically shows, is there an error in that row or not? And are there errors in the column or not? So you exactly know which rows, which columns to basically solve. We have another view, which is the error view, and I'll show that to
Okay.
you as well. But I'll show you how simple it is for you to now identify errors. So, based on the rules that the organization identified and set up, you see that there are errors that are showing up. So, for example, you can already see that finance manager is probably an error, and there's a recommendation that you see up top. Right. It also gives you opportunity to add new rules, exceptions, as well as archive of certain value and add a new rule. Right. So, kind of enables you to do multiple functionalities, functions as you go about. If you see multiple data gaps are showing up, you see a lot of reds come up per se. Let me just show you how probably one or two of these errors can be resolved or caught up, right? So let me just take this example here. Let's say you want this to be
Sorry,
finance.
Raswinder, how is the gender an error?
It
Can you
might
hone
be
in on
the
that?
way someone's worded it, right? So you have five different ways someone's written female with a capital F, small f. So when you're exporting this to a
Okay.
dashboard or using it for any analysis, you might have an error where you want it homogenized and everywhere to be set as right. So that's probably how it shows up as an error. And we've seen this quite
Okay.
frequently where you have a designation where it says senior manager and senior manager both spelled differently. But when you start pulling out and exporting it into either a board presentation or into a dashboard, you say, hey, why are there so many senior managers that exist in a file which are nomenclature? So that's what. So this basically is as simple as just saying, oh, I want the recommended value to come on board, and you can do it. If you have,
And Ranak, all of these errors are basis, the data quality checks, which you would have already added as part of the one-time setup. So we will show that after the validation screen. But this screen just assume that, any of the HR VPs or the COA teams, once they get to know there are so many errors in the span of data, how can they log into the platform and correct it, like, it, as less than, as 5-10 minutes at max. So that's the
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that's how it can be an error. You can also have other errors that are showing up, right? So, for example, you can have something like a blank. Now, in most cases, when you see a blank, you're like, okay, why is there a blank? Let's assume if you see here, this person is the CEO. So, having a manager is probably not something that's going to happen for this person. So, you can actually build this as an exception. And as you do that, it's created a blank as an exception to say, okay, I understand now that this value is going to remain a blank. So something that you and I would have had as tribal knowledge with ourselves saying, okay, why is this a blank? Why did I fill a certain value here? Why did I make something an exception? Now gets etched as a part of a note within our ecosystem to clearly identify and let the next person know that why did we do something, right? Or who did it, so that if they need to reach out and really figure something out. So that way, it's helping you basically resolve and solve multiple gaps that exist in today's ecosystem. Let me take a more complex example, right, of how the platform can enable someone. So let's look at Shrishti here from a data point of view. She has multiple data errors. So you see a designation is flagged as an error. You also end up seeing department being flagged as an error. You see multiple of those come up. Now, if I were just to say that, let's assume grade, subgrade are all errors. So let me just start by saying, okay, let me try and correct the grade for this person. Sorry. Why is this showing? Can I just redo that? There's probably some errors that just occurred.
Yeah, yeah, sure,
Just give me a
sure.
second. Sorry. That's show up. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically, let me not take Srishti, let me take Ankush and show that, Ankush has probably multiple errors in the data here. You'll see fin, you'll see NA, so which is a grade missing. Let me just say that this person's grade is 5. That's the grade that we work with. Now, as you see, instead of becoming green, which shows that the error is resolved, it actually highlights it in yellow. And if you were to just hover over it, it actually tells you that there's an association error +1, right? If I click on it, it's telling me that you've resolved the grade error, and this is what's solved now. But there's a designation, department, grade, subgrade linkage that you've kind of built out where it's now faltering, which you now need to resolve for. So let me just take a shot at it and resolve it. Yeah, I just click on it and it gives me in black options that exist with this grade. And red options are basically newer options that I can actually build out or introduce to the system. So let me just say, I say this is finance here. I keep the designation same. I look at the grade and I look at the subgrade. Probably I say the subgrade is 5.0. It gives me a red. It says that this does not exist in the system. You can create a new one if you want. Right. As I do that, it shows up a window saying, is this a new rule? Is this a recommended thing that you want to add? So it gives me a multitude of options to basically say, how do you introduce this into the ecosystem? As I do that, it still doesn't get resolved. It actually throws another level of errors where now you see finance, and global HR highlighted. Um, all of us understand that when your BU is finance, your SBU cannot be global HR. So I probably just click on this and check, and I see, yeah, it can be. I have options readily available. And let me just select this one, right? And when I do that, you actually see the entire hierarchy resolved, which means that every logic rule that we would have built up at this point of time has been catered for, has been resolved, and that information is now stored within the ecosystem. So what, as I wanted to say, was the platform actually allows you to do multiple things. One, it allows you to resolve errors. Two, it allows you to make exceptions and really save the information in a way that you really need. That's one way to look at the data. The other view that we have is called the error view. How the error view is basically useful is it's only showing you the errors that it's not showing you the rest of the information. You can just hover over and click on any employee ID. It shows you all of the data and errors according to this employee, right? So basically gives you that view of anything that you want to see. But here, as we were updating data, it's basically checking off statuses to say, okay, these are the changes that have been accepted, changed, and done. The actions that we took got recorded here. So you now know that something was made an exception, everything else was aligned. And the best part is actually making an audit trail of everything that you're doing. So if in the future you need an audit trail to say, why was this done, who did it, what exceptions were to be made, all of that information is stored there. Simultaneously gives you an ability to add notes in the ecosystem. So you can say, is the CEO so does not uh, manager. And this basically is now etched in there
Hmm.
for the eternity so that you know that if in the future someone needs to know or reference the data, it's readily available. We have maker checker systems already built in. So I acted here as an admin controller. I can just say no because I did. I'm not going to do that. But if someone sends in a request, I can just say no with a reason, and then they'll get a notification that they can update the data or correct it. So broadly, what's happening is that multiple users are coming on the same platform. Data is being reviewed, checked in parallel, in tandem across multiple users, and everyone's able to see what they need to see. And the module admin, in that sense, is able to completely control the data. There are no approval flows. So if someone's making a change, it flows directly into the platform. None of that's actually, there's no submit button per se. The only submit that we have is
Okay.
actually with the module admin. Once they believe that this data file is complete and they want to push it back into their system of record or into a data warehouse, you can just click on complete run and it basically sends the data through a scheduler to the right source that it needs to. So that's the entirety of how organizations use our platform to get to that one unified view of truth across the data system. Any thoughts, questions before we move on?
So, Raswinder, this is the demographic data, right? The data that is true for someone. You
Yeah,
also spoke of the execution data, like let's say ENPS scores, the performance scores, and all of that.
correct.
Does that also connect to this, and can you do rectifications there also?
You can. So although I'm showing
Okay.
you a very unified and a simple view of one file data coming in, the way the platform structure at the backend is that you can actually bring in data from multiple sources. All of that gets
Hmm.
connected through that one unified code that I was talking about. Like how can you use employee ID to link multiple
Hmm.
files? And hence data flows across all of the platforms. So, for example, if the error that I was showing you here on this page, it actually might be emanating out of a different file set being this authority on a certain data point, and hence you can align and correct it here as well. So, data flows not unidirectionally; it flows multidirectionally across multiple files from where you can either source data or share data with, and hence creating that one unified view of your entire system.
Understood. Got it. So
So
this
on this,
is the
Ranak, the
this is
platform by
yeah.
default gives you the golden copy for each of the fields. So whatever
Hmm.
is the dominant authority. So if in case there are two or three platforms and the files, the data is not aligned. So whatever
Hmm.
is the dominant field, the platform picks it from there and ensures that that is applied to all the other platforms. So whatever is the
Got it.
discrepancy across the data, that gets managed on the platform itself, and the user or the module admin has the option to finalize the golden copy on the platform.
Got it. Okay.
So
Makes sense.
this is the first one. Let me just quickly elaborate on it on your question and show you this. Right, um, all of us know that AI is going to come into our worlds in a much bigger way in
Hmm.
2026, and obviously HR has also started. Has already started, but is going to make those inroads much more prominent this
Yeah.
year. As it starts doing it, the biggest thing with LLMs and AI today is that they understand English and they can use context to basically make information available, right? So they tokenize context and are able to use it. A lot of the systems that we have present today, your HLMs or others, don't actually store information in a way that can be understood by LLMs really well. And hence we see issues where LLMs hallucinate, they give out incorrect information. So they're not very deterministic in that sense, right? You're looking at them making a
Hmm.
decision for you. However, you can guardrail it, right? And that's what we've tried to do. So we've created something called a data catalog. And you would see enterprise systems have and talk a lot about data catalogs and how they're built. And we've kind of built that out, which basically helps AI platforms, LLMs, to understand how your data is today structured. So let me give you an example. In this case,
Okay.
what it does is it harmonizes data across multiple aspects. One, it's harmonized data across all of the columns. So if you see here, you have multiple modules that are present, and what it does, it harmonizes them across the board. It's also telling you where does the golden copy exist and where are the reference copies, so which are second copies, right? So your employee ID, for example, in ATS is being picked up from the employee ID which is in the HRMS, right? So you exactly know that if in the future the AI or the LLM needs to understand where to pick up the employee ID from, it'll actually reference the
Hmm.
HRMS file and not really to the ATS file, right? Similarly, it understands, are there any rules? Should duplicates be allowed? Should blanks be allowed? What kind of data type is present? Are there lists associated with this, which we build as a part of our work? So has entire context basis what questions asked of the data. That's what the column feature does. And similarly, we've built out the entire stack, right? We now can tell you that what designations are allowed within the data. So if you see here, you might have designations such as grade, delivery grade 1, 2, 3. And it also tells you that in our use case, you had delivery grade one spelled two ways, and it's kind of already merged it and created one unified view of those, right? It keeps a note if values are correct or incorrect. So here the values are incorrect because it's crossed out. So you know that this is a value that will not get used in the future per se. So it gives you a very good idea of how your data needs to be understood. And it takes it from the golden copy. So now you know exactly what data is available, what will get used. And similarly, we built out the entire stack around how AI can learn without actually having to find information which is readily available. So what values are already built as rules? So you have geo rules, you have bio structure rules. What values exist under it? Everything is something that's identified and stored within the ecosystem. So it understands what data connectors you're using. So everything is here, and that's what's going to enable your systems of the future. And when you asked the question, is it linked across systems? I wanted to just show you that right here, you exactly know which are the files that link with one another, which are the columns that link with one another. Because you can directly come here and see, okay, my data is linked through the employee ID across multiple files. And hence, these are not the golden copies. Their golden copy exists in those files. So gives you the clarity of how
Hmm.
multi-system linkages can be built.
Got it. And how is AI plugging into this? You said with
Yeah,
this data now AI is coming in.
sure. Yeah, so we built our MCP protocol already. So we have MCP
Okay.
enabled on our
Okay.
platform. Yeah, and we linked it up to Microsoft Copilot, so we actually can link this with your existing policies, processes. So think of it this way: that you have a pertinent question around saying, okay, I have a personal policy around leave. Instead of just generically saying your leave policy for an FTE in India is so and so, it can actually pull up your reference data, merge it with the policy data, and then give you an answer saying, hey, although the policy says 30 days, you have 18 days of leave left. So what the platform's trying to now do is take the guesswork out of the ecosystem, and build a lot
Hmm.
more reality into it. That's one. And two, given that you are giving it data that you know is accurate because you've verified the data quality, you also know that it's not going to hallucinate because of not because of the LLM, but because of the data being incorrect. Right? Because you said that it's hallucinated. You don't know if it's the LLM or it's the data at the back end. But now you're sure that it's not the data.
Hmm.
So you know it's probably an LLM issue if you need to guardrail it. So the MCP allows us to work across different platforms. We've built with Copilot right now, but we'll expand to Google ecosystems, and allow also multiple individual platforms to work with us in the future.
That becomes a key use
Yeah.
case for the HR team, because given that it's highly compliant and audited, they cannot really afford to operate with an AI agent which tends to hallucinate. So with this MDM or the master data management platform, that is what we're trying to add to the existing LLMs.
It would be really cool to see. Like, do you have like a co-pilot right now, which on which data is connected?
It's honestly in beta,
Okay.
Ranak. We still figuring out some of the bugs, but
Okay.
yeah, we are actually working on it.
Hmm. This is mind blowing. Like this part especially, right? This is what I remember we had done it on Lucas Studios way back.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
we'd taken 4 or 5 places and just we had a kid from ID come in and he built this. The file became so huge it stopped opening because he had got so many data points into it, and through those checkboxes we are done. And the anchor in our world is always going to be employee ID or email
Correct.
ID, mostly
Correct.
between both of that, right? Just this connector basically solves for so much, and I'm sure you've got some AI engine running on the background, right, where it is understanding those problems.
It is. So
Amazing.
we
Okay.
built I think Ranak, for us, what we were trying to do is, with the hype we said, can we build an entire agentic AI ecosystem, right? And probably we can. You're not saying it can be built. It's just that there are multiple barriers with that, right? One, there's a huge privacy barrier with any of your LLMs today. A lot of organizations aren't willing to
That's
adopt a
true.
third party AI agent platform easily.
Mm.
So we said that's probably going to hinder us and the market for now. Second, the bigger challenge also ends up being the fact that it's expensive for LLMs to do anything, not just build, but also maintain. You're going to run into billions of tokens if you were to give this out to maybe 5,000 employees and just say, go crazy with the platform, right? And kind of build out. Every
Mm.
inference, every request is going to be tokenized. It's going to pull out data and increase the weight. The third that we've seen is the hallucination angle of it. Um, LLMs today aren't guardrailed. LLMs by nature figure out what the next word is. That's what a token is doing. And a lot of what we do in HR is quite straightforward. If this is happening, this should happen, right? So there's a very clearly defined rule set. So you can't probably have any hallucination actually occur, because the minute a hallucination occurs, it's actually going to create liability and lawsuits probably for you in the longer run. And hence, you're not seeing a lot of HR come out and really openly talk about it. There's still obviously a lot of betas ongoing in this. So when you start looking at all of the three problems and ecosystems, we then build the agentic AI ecosystem. But we've built AI agents because we know for a fact when you're trying to just write an English rule and saying my date of joining cannot be before my date of promotion, etc., or vice versa,
Mm.
you want that rule to be very clear and implemented every time the same. We've seen dates every
Mm.
to be a major issue. People end up confusing it's DDMMYY, MMDDYY, and we see a whole bunch of things
Yeah.
happen. We've hard coded to say that figure out what formats each of your systems are using, harmonize it, and kind of give it a unified. And then if there are errors, call it out. So
Oh.
AI agents are good at a lot of pieces when you're trying to work with English as a language. They're not great when you're trying to work with data as an outcome. And hence, we built very clear outcome based AI agents into the platform. And we've hosted it on our AWS, but not really, make it an entire LLM based platform because that has its own challenges of it.
Also, Ranak, when we had spoken, with the HR teams, they said that, there has to be a human in the loop because you're talking about
Mm.
organization data, right? So someone has to be an approval before finalizing all the data quality checks, they flow back into a system of records.
Mm.
So that was, a clear ask that while we can allow the AI agents to do the bulk of the work, but do ensure there's a human in the loop, at least as of now, until like, the AI agents also mature enough.
It'd be interesting to know, like, what are the AI stuff that you've seen organizations actually use your data on, and broadly just hearing on the use cases. Like, because when I look at it, I have a lot of use cases in my head, but that's my
Mm.
lens. What are the organizations broadly using Talenode for?
So, Ranak, we are working with multiple organizations, and as you said, right, that data is a very intimate need for any organization, and everyone has their own unique sort of challenges. So, we are working with a fintech organization, where they have a dashboard, but the data which is flowing in from the system of records is not up to the mark. So, they are using
Mm.
our platform to structure the data across, their entire employee tech stack, and then creating a pipeline for the analytics dashboard. So, what we've been able to do
Mm.
is to reduce the dashboard refresh, uh, that's a cycle from 2 weeks to about 3 days, and the data accuracy has gone up significantly from 60% to almost like more than 85%. And this is all in less than 1 month.
Oh,
We are
awesome.
working with a food and beverage organization. They were migrating from one HRMS to the other HRMS platform.
That's
And obviously,
yeah,
the data from one platform was a big mess.
yeah.
And they realized that if in case they transport the same data to the other platform, the workflows, will again be wonky and the employee experience will go for a toss. So we acted as the data layer for the migration, and we were able to reduce the migration timelines, ensure zero data loss, and the employee experience was on point from day one because there were no data errors. So that was the other use case for HRMS migration. The third is obviously to get to a single source of truth for the organizations, where the data is integrated and validated for ongoing use and actionability. So that is the
Mm.
third use case, that we don't want to again do all the manual reconciliations and have different like destinations for data. So give us a one-stop shop. That is the third. The fourth use case, which we are seeing organization use, is for reorganizations. So when you do an M&A or a reorg, right, you need to do a lot of archive features. You need to add new team names or disband the earlier ones. So that is where they're seeing, a lot of value to use our platform as a whiteboard to compare org structures and get to the final or the right structure for them. So those are some of the use cases which we are right now experimenting and working with organizations on. And the other one being obviously the AI agents, where they have the SharePoint for all the policies and they're using our platform as a data foundation to club the two together to ensure that the AI agents don't hallucinate.
So, what about payroll and wherever it comes to pay? Because that is also a big problem for us, right? That where pay goes wrong, wrong mapping, wrong bank accounts, wrong calculations. In fact, right? Is that something that you
Payroll,
guys
yep.
have
Yeah.
or you've seen?
Yeah, we've built it out. So that's a huge problem, right? Now there are two components to payroll, Ronak, the way it comes about. One is basically the entire calculation, right? What's your tax to be
Mm.
deducted, which have multiple components, etc., and things like that. The other is saying how much is the payout, is the calculation for this month done correctly. The first one, which is probably where majority of your payroll systems come, is not something that you want to get into because that's a universe in itself. How do you basically structure payroll
Sure.
by state, by different roles? Now, the other place where you have a compensation defined and you want to use that to be broken down into monthly payout cycles, things like that, that's something that we absolutely do. So we built out essentially rules for you, and maybe you can use it to be customized. A very recent use case that we did is we actually built out a sales incentive calculator for an organization, which had 8 different plans that employees were on. And they used to tweak the variables, right? So if, for example, you sell 5 policies or so 10 policies, you need to get a different variable payout. So we created that ecosystem for them to actually get the data calculations in place and to also flag if there are any discrepancies in the data. What our platform allowed them to do was that you set it up once, and then if in the future you change the parameters, right? You change thresholds, basically saying, okay, now the policy instead of 5 and 10 is 8 and 16. That's a single click on our platform to actually make that inference change for you. So that's actually allowing them to build the ecosystem much faster and use the outcome in a much streamlined way. So they don't have to come back and get something redeveloped from us again. It's just in-house for them to kind of change.
And the other use case is on the compliance angle, because with the increasing
Mm.
scrutiny and the DPDP Act, a lot of organizations are now trying to program all the data checks for compliance onto our platform and just be
Mm.
100% assured that before every audit, the data has gone through all the checks,
Yeah.
and what was earlier used to be a nightmare for organizations is now a breeze for them.
Mhm. The sales incentive one, I actually meant to say sales incentive. I said payroll.
But both work, right?
That in
Yeah.
itself is, but just the sales incentive and the variable payouts part, which is like when you're in a sales driven org, it's monthly, weekly, whatever. That by itself is like a business by itself, right? And you guys just said it like, oh, we also do it. I know I'm working with companies who just do this,
Yeah.
right? And the problem here is the migration with the data from the HRMS. Now, if that's not done, that's not right. Payroll is not here. They are stuck because this
Yeah.
data is not there. And it's just so difficult to sort of homogenize both because both don't talk to each other, both don't understand what's going on. Amazing.
The team that is
And this
using data, the one who is generating data, the one who is managing data, all three are in this platform.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, this is like this is the right solution at the right time. right? I get the need. I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of people who are more data thinking forward. Like, and there are many names while I'm just speaking come to mind, right? Who would just see this and be like, damn, this is exactly what I needed because now I have hired somebody to do this.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. That person wants to leave. I'm like, oh my God, my whole analytics is now going to fall apart, right? And like my boss wants me to do AI on it and data in EA, what AI will I do, right? Which is a problem that we had.
We really love the fact that we did a demo with you on it because data is seen as a uber problem. Everyone says, someone will do it. But who will do it? How will it
Mm,
get done? How much time does it end up taking? What's the value to get if you were to truly do this? Value is sometimes missed out. And I think businesses, corporate
mm,
functions, if you were to look at finance, marketing, have all realized the value. There are enough enterprise platforms
of
that do it
course.
for those internal functions, if you were to call them so. But I think HR is starting to realize that until unless you kind of get this right, you are going to sidetrack data over a period of time. There's no way you can actually use what you have until unless you kind of get gotten it to a level it's usable.
People have realized that this needs to be there. Ideally, if you're using a different tool for recruitment and let's say a different HRMS, ideally you want to see the whole journey from
Correct.
hire to coming into performance to the whole thing. Like
Yeah.
that, unless you have the whole value chain, what's the analytics? It's a very siloed analytics, which again we could do it because we saw the value in it, but ultimately it was just a lot of pain to do it, right?
Yeah.
But amazing. I'm so happy to see, like, we get so lost in the shiny object syndrome of, we'll use AI, but we forget the orchestration layer, which today is not there, right? And
Yeah.
then we sort of give up, or we just take the parts which are there and run with it, and the rest of it is just on Excel, and we're like, yeah, yeah, hey, just make do with what we have with each. Right?
Yeah.
So happy to see this. Like, but again, this kid who's watching, or let's say this young person in HR, has been given the responsibility data, or they've been given AI responsibilities, what have you. They suspect that their data is messy. They know their data is messy, right? What is like actionable steps for him or her to take to be able to get to a correct form of data? I mean, one is obviously like reach out to you guys and take Talenode, but um, before that, what are the stuff they should be doing?
No, I think fair question. Like, I think it's an intent problem, right? And everyone says, "Oh, we'll change the intent of our team to kind of become data first," right? It's not going to happen that easily. People are set in certain ways. So the first thing that I would recommend is figure out how you can use our existing solutions. So if you have an HRMS, if you have a system that works for you, how can you use that more effectively to kind of build it out? And when you do that, focus on the 20% of the data that you know is going to get used first, right? Build that Pareto principle into your work, but don't try and solve 100% of data in the first go. It's never going to happen. It's never going to materially impact or value anyone. So figure out the 20% data, solve for it, get someone to use that data per se. That's where you should get started. Bring in data ownership by ensuring everyone has the same definition. A lot of times you don't know if it's DDMMI or MDUI because you've not been inducted into using data in your organization. You've been inducted into how the process works or how you manage or how we work as an HRVP or a COE. But nobody's inducted into saying this is how we're going to use or store data that we need. So getting a bit of an orientation around what data does the organization have, how does it use it, what are the standardized ways of working with it, is something that we would recommend. I think third is obviously upskilling.
And Ranak, you mentioned that, they can also reach out to Talenode. So when we start any engagement, with any of our clients, we do a simple data health audit. So, we just take any of their HRMS files or any file they're comfortable with, and we, basically do a real-time 2-hour workshop with them where we do all the entire setup, add the custom rules there, like real time, and get them to see, how good or bad the data quality is. So the difference is, what the HR leaders believe their data quality is and what it actually comes out after the data health audit. And the expressions are amazing just to capture, because that is the stark reality, because they have never measured it, right? So once you see it real time happening in front of you, you realize, okay, how much of a chaos it is.
And you can do this in 2 hours. That's it.
Absolutely. In less than two
In less
hours.
than 2 hours.
In less
Yeah.
than 2 hours.
Oh, Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in and just, first of all, like for doing this, taking up this problem. Like I said, it's a problem that doesn't get acknowledged. And I'm so happy like someone's doing it. Like, I can, like, I'm definitely going to be in touch with you guys for a bunch of stuff I'm doing. If I was still in my previous company, I would have for sure reached out to you guys. I'll leave your emails or any link below. So folks listening in, I strongly
Sure.
recommend because like I have been an advocate of tech analytics for a really long time, and one of the problems has always been data. That because of lack of a data, we are not able to show outcomes. It's not that we don't know what to show.
Yeah.
We know very well what to show, when to show, whom to show.
Yep.
It's just that we don't have confidence in the data, so we don't show it. So we just keep shut, and then ultimately it's the function that gets beaten up. That hey, sales can show it, HR can't. Any just closing thoughts from both of you for folks listening in before we wrap up?
I would love to see HR be more proactive, using data, and I wanted to do it all my life for 15 years. So would love for organizations to use a lot more data
Same, yeah.
in the future. And I don't think data needs to replace intuition. It needs to be data plus intuition, if that is the right way it works. Would love to see how organizations start using AI. We both believe very strongly in the potential of AI and what it can do. It's just that everyone needs to realize it's not a magic bullet. It'll need some work before it can actually do the magic that you want. So keep at it. I think it's important that organizations just try and put in the effort and to learn newer technologies that are coming up. And I think that's probably the delta that exists right
Uh, Ankit, you wrote you just cannot grow AI magic on barren data soil. I just wanted to preface that. Like that's exactly what I think Raswinder
now. Yeah.
spoke of. But
Absolutely, absolutely. Because
yeah,
we have seen that happening, and companies, have burned their fingers. So,
yeah.
hey, you can either learn with time or you can proactively make that
Yeah.
fix.
Thank you guys for coming on. This was awesome. I'll have their contacts below. Feel free to reach out to them.
Thanks so
All right.
much,
Thank you
Ronak.
guys.
Thank
Thanks
you so
everyone
much,
for
Ronak.
listening. Bye.